Hello, I want to welcome you to our series of LaRouche PAC discussions, which have been exploring the implications and the importance of Donald Trump's Agenda 47 proposals. I'm Susan Kokinda, and I'm joined again by Brian Lantz. Brian has written extensively on Lyndon LaRouche's approach to economics, which is grounded in our uniquely human capacity to improve our dominion over nature through science and technology. This is very, very relevant to tonight's discussion. Donald Trump, in a number of recent speeches, has adamantly revived his proposal to build a missile defense shield to defend the United States from incoming nuclear missiles. In these speeches and in many of his other recent speeches, he has warned that we have never been closer to World War III. In underscoring the need for such a missile defense shield. If you go to Trump's website, donaldjtrump.com, and click on the Agenda 47 tab, you will find him present the case for a missile defense shield in a video back in February. We tonight are going to explore why this is long overdue. Lyndon LaRouche and Ronald Reagan pioneered the idea of using new physical principles, directed energy capabilities to render nuclear missiles impotent and obsolete. This was President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, which he announced in March 1983, over 40 years ago. We needed it then, but we never built it. It is needed even more today, given the development of hypersonic missiles, which can now overwhelm our defenses. This is a very scary situation, which you will hear about as Brian goes through what the implications of this now. But we have to make this a new Sputnik moment for the United States, one which prompts us to throw off the economic death grip of globalization and unleash a scientific resurgence driven by such new physical principles as envisioned by Reagan and LaRouche long ago. We're going to explore the urgency of this, not only for our national defense, but also to reverse the economic collapse which is now looming in front of us. So I'm very happy to welcome Brian back. And first, Brian, I want to ask you to tell our audience what President Trump did in his first administration to revive a missile defense program and to locate that in the new strategic situation in which we find ourselves today.
Well, good to be back, Susan. Well, in 2019, and really you can see this as part of the same package as Artemis, the Artemis program, to go back to the moon and Mars. But in 2019, in January, Trump announced that the United States was going to build a defensive shield to protect the United States, that he was mobilizing the resources of the country to do so. And he was doing so with the backing of the U.S. Department of Defense and well, the U.S. military and corporate world. Since then, there's been wave after wave of investment into it, and of course, partly this has been propelled by the development of hypersonic systems by Russia and China, which is kind of put a line underneath the necessity of developing this now rapidly. We now have, at this moment, at least 5 hypersonic programs under development. However, we have actually no capability to produce hypersonics at scale at this moment. We don't have it. I'm just quoting, an official from Northrop Grumman on that. But that's what has to come next. But that's what Trump unleashed in 2019 in his recent call. Emphasizing that again, as you mentioned, just makes clear that with his presidency, he's committed to this, along with Artemis, as science drivers for the entire U.S. economy.
For people who may not be that familiar with in a sense, the science behind something like strategic defense initiative, missile defense, what are the kinds of cutting edge technologies that are involved in actually creating, as President Trump has said, a shield over the United States that would protect us from nuclear weapons?
Well, of course, when President Ronald Reagan announced on March 23rd, 1983, the Strategic Defense Initiative, what he was confronting primarily was the threat of ICBMs. And what was the basis for rendering ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, obsolete? You know, those missiles go into outer space. They travel into outer space and then back in, and up to Mach 23. I mean, 15 to 20,000 miles an hour. I mean, you know, they're fast, but they don't maneuver. And because they, once launched, they have a given trajectory, they can be tracked and targeted. It's not easy because of the speed and so forth, but they can be tracked. And that was the intention of the Strategic and Defense Initiative, to render ICBMs impotent and obsolete, as President Reagan said. Today, now with hypersonics, we've got another dimension to this, because hypersonics go into the upper atmosphere, but then, but not beyond, and then immediately duck, if you will, duck back down, gaining speed, and glide. Some powered, some not, but glide at very low altitudes to a target or targets, multiple warheads. You know, that's another dimension of what's really developed. They're independently maneuverable. They're traveling at speeds of 5, 10 or higher Mach speeds, Mach meaning speed of sound. And because of the maneuverability, they can evade standard radar systems and so forth, because of the algorithms which guide them. Otherwise, they can be directed. So this just increases a whole level of complexity, and they're coming in below the radar, right? They're coming in from below the horizon and coming around in the atmosphere itself at these incredible speeds. Now, we know China and Russia both have developed hypersonics. I mean, that's well known at this point. The U.S. does not have hypersonics. This year, the effort, the U.S. Army and Navy are working to stand up the first long-range hypersonic weapon, LHRW, long-range hypersonic weapon. They failed twice this year. They're hoping to do it before the end of the calendar year. So we're close to that. It'll be paired with a what's called the Common Glide Body, one of these glide vehicles, so we're attempting to, get the first one working, so to speak. That's an offensive system, the first offensive hypersonic system that the U.S. would put in place. There's also defensively, there's the efforts to develop a defensive hypersonic missile or set of missiles, specifically that would have the targeting capacity. And here you have to go into outer space. And this is a parallel with the original Reagan program or perspective, is that if you were going to target ICBMs, you've got to get systems up there into outer space. And the first aspects of that is in terms of surveillance sensors. We have much more advanced sensors now, and we're putting up the first tranches of what is a 7-layer system of defense right now, in terms of sensors for tracking, surveillance, then transport, that is transport of communications among satellites, but also to command and control on the ground, and to launch vehicles. And obviously, potentially, or really what you would really want to aim at is getting something like neutron beam weapons neutron particle beam weapon systems up into the above the atmosphere to target these new hypersonics in the early phases in terms of launch. You're talking about thousands of kilometers, in terms of maintaining a tight beam. But the whole idea here is an advantage, a flanking advantage now even more important now because of hypersonics, is to be able to do what needs to be done at the speed of light. We can develop hypersonic missiles, intercept missiles. We can go in that direction, but really, in terms of dealing with this hypersonic threat, we need to have not just Mach 10 or whatever. We need the speed of light, and that's where we need to go. And of course, that would represent a whole new generations of technologies and spinoffs.
Well, thinking about precisely what you're saying in terms of a whole new family, a whole new generation of these kinds of capabilities, that gets directly to the crux of this discussion, which is, what kind of economy do you have to have, and what kind of workforce do you have to do this? You and I were reminiscing a bit before we started about the impact of the Soviet launch of Sputnik back in the 1950s, and how that was a huge shock to the United States. And as a byproduct of that, both you and I got decent science and math educations in elementary school and junior high, because our country went, oh my God, we are behind, and we are not producing what we need to produce, both from the education system and obviously from our economy. Today, we won't even get into the education system in this discussion because that's too much of a horror story. But we have a hollowed out economy. It's been hollowed out by financialization and globalization. And that is something which acutely affects these kinds of areas of advanced defense production and so on. And I know there's finally apparently some discussion within the government itself of that. I think they call it the Valley of Death.
Yeah, you can put up the slide whenever you'd like. This was published this year. The General Accounting Office, GAO, published a study on the necessity of addressing the transitional phase in the development of direct energy weapons, DEWs, direct energy weapons. That includes neutron beams, but they're talking more about microwave and laser systems, which are more on shall we say, the tactical level, although they may rise to the strategic in the case of laser systems. But yes, there you have it in that slide. The question is here, look, billions of dollars. I mean, billions of dollars are going into these tens of billions of dollars cumulatively are now going into a whole array of projects, from microwave to laser, which is photons, to particle beam, which is atomic and subatomic particles. But these are all in the prototype stage. The General Accounting Office is making a point, and they're not alone in this. This is something that's actually been taken up by the major companies, aerospace companies themselves now, is what about that gap in between? Just to quote, for example, Elon Musk. You could also, quote, Andrew Grove from Intel or Jack Welch, formerly from General Electric. They made similar points, but, Elon Musk said, it's 25,000 times more difficult to manufacture than prototype, to scale up to manufacture. That's that gap in between. You can have a prototype, but the manufacturing potential or capability, and that, of course, the question of the skilled workforce has a lot of to do with that tool and die capability and so forth. But it's also the capital, to have the capital available, the plant equipment. South Korea has solved this problem to a significant degree. Obviously, they're not building the kinds of defensive systems the United States is attempting to do right now on their own. But they've a combination, a collaboration between government and the private sector, a collaboration, like the wartime mobilization for World War II. You could take as an example, or the space program itself under Kennedy, the moonshot. That kind of collaboration is what's critical. Without closing that valley of death, you can't translate the prototypes into productive capability, into output. And that's what outsourcing was, is we stop manufacturing and we send it overseas. And that means you lose all of the problem solving, all of the knowledge, all of the invention that comes through the process of bringing a prototype into them up to manufacturing scale. It's not just, you take a couple marbles and you string them together or something, or dominoes. It's a complex process. Supply chains, materials, how the pieces are going to fit together, machine tools, the refinement of machine tool capacity to get the high tolerances and so forth. All of these things, it all has to come together. And it's a real problem solving process. So this is what's being pointed to. And I would just, mention in regard to this, you've got right now, Northrop Grumman, has just opened up just in August in Elkton, Maryland, this brand new huge facility dedicated to, under one roof, to both design, planning, manufacture of hypersonic systems, starting with scramjet engines. They're also doing now composites. They've been asked by the Pentagon to also get involved in the production of composite materials for the glide vehicles and so forth. This is a 60,000 square foot facility, but it's on 550 acres, so it can be expanded. This is a dedicated facility. Basically, they're saying, we realize that in this scramble to get hypersonics up and operating, we're going to have to do it all. And we're going to have to, we're going to use digital engineering, and we're going to put our design teams together with our engineers, with our manufacturing people, and we're going to put them on the same floor, and they're going to collaborate. And it really, in some ways, harks to Elon Musk's iterative process. The kind of, I think he really has inspired some new thinking, with the results he's gotten with SpaceX that you see here. But there's also a similar programs going on with what's called the Next Generation Interceptor Program, which is really just kind of a jump up, but short of hypersonics. And it's an attempt to build up our defensive capability. We have about 44 interceptors now, based in Alaska and Vandenberg and California. Very limited capacity for defense of the United States from incoming ICBMs, much less hypersonics. They're trying to upgrade that. Well, so you've got Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, all have put together brand new facilities, state-of-the-art facilities down at the Alabama space complex, and they're committed together to building out the next generation of interceptors. Again, but this is, basically saying, okay, we're going to do it from soup to nuts. We're going to do it under one roof. We're going to collaborate across companies. So this is it's not just the GAO, as some number crunchers that are realizing, we got this problem. It's manufacturers themselves, and I'm not saying we should count on the big five aerospace companies. it's these guys in turn are going to rely on, small and medium-sized companies, and right down to the, small machine shops, specialized machine shops, to produce the components that are going to go into these systems. So, if you think about it, Susan, if we apply that more broadly to the U.S. economy, which is really what has to happen. I mean, in terms of a surge capacity, the U.S. surge capacity, in terms of defense, in terms of time of war, knock on wood, it depends on the entire U.S. economy. It's not one little sector of the economy. It's not defense per se. It's the entire economy that's got to be rebuilt. But this definitely is a sign of some old thinking come new again, in terms of where we have to go, and we have a spark here, and we got to spread that spark. We got to set and spread a fire.
Well, it sounds to me like the Russian and Chinese development of hypersonics has been a real shock to the system of our economy. And again, it really underscores the complete disaster of running your economy from the standpoint purely of financial profit, which is what is increasingly dominated us.
Yes.
Really since the space program. Increasingly, our economy has been run by this, what Donald Trump calls the globalist financier class. And the consequence of it is, that we are way, way behind. And as I say, it's like a shock to the system, forcing us to go back to the kind of what LaRouche called full set economy.
Yes.
Your economy is based on your ability to build all of the essential things, grow the essential things, and so on, because you're running your economy from the standpoint of producing things, as opposed to running your economy from the standpoint of delivering a profit to BlackRock or something like that.
Yeah, this is a little sachet to the side, but I think it's very relevant. If you go back to 1991, there was the so-called peace dividend then, supposedly. And Secretary of Defense Perry, this was under George H.W. Bush, but, it bled over into the Clinton administration, called a meeting of the aerospace companies. It became known as the Last Supper in the aerospace sector. And Perry just said, hey, look, there is not going to be enough contracts going forward. This is after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So you guys are going to have to consolidate. About 50 companies became 5, literally. It became an oligopoly in terms of the aerospace sector. We lost 1/3 of our defense production capacity as a consequence of that. We certainly didn't see any peace dividend in terms of rebuilding our cities or other things that needed to be done because there was financialization. The 1990s, 1980s, and 90s, that's when outsourcing began. The whole financialization process began. Aerospace is completely, basically run from Wall Street. These are not really independent companies in the traditional sense of the term. Again, I think you're right, Susan, that the shock of what Russia and China have done in terms of their breakthroughs in terms of hypersonics. There's other aspects of it that could be discussed, but just looking at that, it has really kind of, you've got a situation now where the issue of national security and related thinking, is beginning to break through. Some individuals, obviously, Trump at the leadership of that, we're playing our role, obviously, critical role, is breaking through this straitjacket of financialization and bean counting to say, we gotta turn over dirt. We gotta build. We gotta produce our way out of this mess. So a little bit of the history background.
Oh, that's useful. in a recent speech in Detroit, when he came to speak to the auto workers, Donald Trump used a phrase which I'm becoming very fond of called economic nationalism, and patriotic protectionism. But when you look at where we are in terms of the fact that we at the moment can't do the things that we need to do, either from a national security standpoint or for basic economic survival, the body of policies that Trump has put forward under Agenda 47, which do fall under this umbrella of economic nationalism. But as you say, the Artemis project to return to the moon, the revival of a missile defense shield, his intention to make us a manufacturing superpower once again, which is the only way you can do any of these things. This is an entire body of policies which really represents a complete and total break with everything that we've done for about a half a century now. And
it truly is Promethean in its potentialities.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're unleashing human creativity, mm-hmm. and applying it, which is what you have to do. You just can't go off, and dream dreams. The point is, it's making physical changes on nature for man. Increasing, as Lyndon LaRouche emphasizes, an economist, the increase of energy flux density is applied, to a cross area of application. If you take what we're now doing in the Huntsville area with the Missile Defense Agency and their attempts to upgrade the interceptor defense system, and beyond that, more importantly, more profoundly, with hypersonics and new hypersonic systems, and moving with these new space-based layered defense systems of surveillance, tracking, and so on and so forth. If you take that to the rest of the economy, not just as a thing, but as this reawakened capacity for creative thought, there's nothing we can't do for ourselves and for mankind.
Well, I think that's an appropriate place to end. Thank you, Brian. This has been fascinating. I think there's other aspects of this that we're going to want to explore in the future, but it's good to have you back.
Good to be here. Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. All right. And we will return with further discussions of President Trump's Agenda 47 proposals. So thanks for joining us. Good night.